The State of Israel was established in May 1948, 1,878 years after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem and the loss of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. Although understood and greeted with blessings from many nations around the world, local Arab and Muslim nations were not very friendly to the new re-established Jewish state. The future of the reborn Jewish state was unclear. 7 decades later, we may take for granted and forget the great challenges of the first decades of the State of Israel. We might speak about some of those challenges in future podcasts. Today, we are reviewing the current borders of the State of Israel. Some of them have become accepted and agreed upon by the neighboring states through peace treaties. Some of them are in place de facto through the decision of the government of the State of Israel and through the patrols of the IDF, Israel's defense forces. But these areas are de facto under the control of the State of Israel. So when I speak about the borders or the internal areas of the land of Israel, I'm speaking about the areas within these borders that I will describe. Israel has common borders with 4 countries: Egypt in the southwest, Jordan in the east, Syria in the northeast, and Lebanon in the north. The border with Egypt between Rafah and Eilat was originally drawn by the British in 1906. That's right, nearly 40 years before the establishment of the State of Israel. Britain had controlled Egypt, and they had an interest in the Suez Canal, which they saw as their property or business, and they wanted to push off the Ottoman Empire to keep them at a far distance. So the line between Egypt and the Ottoman Empire was drawn by the British between Rafah and Eilat. That border later became the international border between Israel and Egypt. In 1956 and 1967, Israel's army crossed over that border and took control of the Sinai Peninsula. But ultimately, in the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt in 1979, the sides agreed to acknowledge that line as the international border between the 2 countries. The border of Israel to the east is along the Jordan River, or more precisely, right in the middle of the Jordan River. And again, Israel was at war with Jordan in Israel's War of Independence in 1948. And in 1967, in the 6-Day War, when Israel took Judea and Samaria, which the Jordanians call the West Bank. So the Jordanians do not recognize Israel's ownership of the West Bank, so they don't acknowledge Israel's border along the Jordan River in the areas of the Jordan Valley, which are in what they consider the West Bank. But again, de facto, Israel's army patrols all of that border from the north, along in the middle of the Jordan River, all the way down to Eilat. Israel has controlled the Golan Heights since 1967, and the government of Israel declared sovereignty in the Golan in 1981. This move was recently recognized by the United States in 2019 under the leadership of President Donald Trump. Other countries still refuse to recognize Israel's claim to the Golan. But again, de facto, Israel controls this area, and this area internally within Israel is considered the same as any other part of the country. The border with Lebanon in the north has been more or less the same since the end of Israel's War of Independence. Israel and Lebanon have no relations to this day, but the border is preserved more or less the same. There are different types of borders. Surely when we're speaking about the land of Israel, who has such a wealth of history and tradition and Bible and so forth. In this episode, we discuss the political borders of the State of Israel currently as they stand. In future episodes, we'll speak about different types of borders, which include natural borders or areas within the State of Israel. There's the Shfela, the lower ground along the sea line of Israel. There's the mountain area, Ahar, where I live in the mountains front in Judea and Samaria going down to the south. There's the Jordan Valley, which is the lowest place in the world, and the desert, the Judean desert, and the Negev, and so forth. So we'll speak about those types of borders, of natural borders, and the different types of wildlife and flowers and vegetation that grow in these different places in the land of Israel. And of course, there are historical borders and biblical borders that we read about in the Bible and in the chronicles of history of the different conquerors who controlled the land of Israel and how they divided the land of Israel and what the borders were in each place, and of course in the monarchy of the Davidic dynasty, King David and King Solomon, the kings of Judea and the kings of Israel. Like everything else in Israel, the history of the borders is complex and contested by some. In my strategic tours and briefings, I try to give some clarity and perspective to understand these ideas. And of course, when we have more time, we can dive deeper into the complexities of these situations. But for this, I hope that I gave you a basic overview of the current borders of Israel as they stand today. And I welcome you to visit with me here in the land of Israel and to see some of this for yourself. Be well.